This is America Weekend. I'm Mike Bennett. Naturalist and farmer Greg Quinn is a regular contributor. He's responsible, in fact, for bringing the black currants back to the U.S. market and, in fact, grows black currants on his current farm in the Hudson Valley, New York.
Hi, I'm Greg Quinn, and welcome to this week's entry into Notes from the Currant Farm. After this exceptionally hard winter, everyone is looking for signs of spring here in the Northeast. Winter's last stand is evident in nighttime temperatures of 20 degrees, and a dusting of snow this morning on the pine boughs out by the pond. But spring will not be deterred, and everywhere I look, I see signs of her imminent arrival. The buds on the black and red currant plants have swollen and are ready to burst into tiny pendulous flowers as soon as the temperature warms up a bit. And patches of bare ground has begun to peek through the last of the deep snow. My honeybees have been doing their cleansing flights every day that's over 40 degrees. Within a week, the pussy willows will begin to bloom. All willows are dioecious, which means that male flowers and female flowers occur on separate plants. When that soft, furry catkin of the male pussy willow blooms, its hundreds of anthers become tipped with bright yellow pollen, which the bees can smell from miles away. This is the first food of the year for the bees. Pollen is the carbohydrate in the honeybee's diet. And when the workers begin to bring it back to the hive in the spring and feed it to the queen, she begins laying eggs for the first time since the end of last summer. It takes 21 days for a worker bee to develop from an egg, and it's important for the hive to have as many workers as possible when the nectar begins to flow from the flowering fruit trees and bushes. So the early pollen from the pussy willows is crucial for the success of the hive for the rest of the year. In addition to providing great early sources of pollen for honeybees, the 400-plus varieties of the valuable willow family have played an important role throughout human history. The willow has many uses. The willow canes were often used to make rods and timber for crude ancient dwellings, and the strong but pliable twigs and bendable branches of the young willows, called osiers, are ideal for weaving baskets, wicker, cane for the seats of chairs, and the willow bark was used to tan hides. My favorite story about the value of willows, however, goes back to about 440 BC. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, had, as the story goes, hypothesized that if one could determine the geographical source of an ailment, nature would have provided a botanical cure in the same location. One of the most familiar afflictions back then, as now, was the common cold, with all of the usual fevers, inflammation, aches, and pains. And he deduced that colds were most often brought on by exposure to damp, chilly environments. So he began exploring the plants around ponds, streams, and wetlands. Willows are found throughout the world growing in these types of areas, and so it didn't take him long to discover that boiling the bark of this plant produced a tea that greatly helped to reduce fevers and inflammation and ease pain. The botanical name of the willows is from the Greek, salix, and the magical compound he discovered, salicin, was named after that plant. Today, we know it as salicylic acid, aspirin. This morning, sitting at the old harvest table in our east-facing kitchen, I was thinking about bees and pussy willows over my first cup of coffee. The snow-covered wildflower field across the lane began to slowly reveal itself as daylight crept down the hill. Inch by inch, the first rays of sun ignited the crystals of last night's flurries. I took my coffee out onto the porch and slowly, decadently inhaled the chilly air. You could almost feel spring coming over the horizon. 3 does suddenly hopped over the old stone wall from the woods halfway up the field. 2 were yearlings, and the larger doe was obviously heavy with this year's fawns. As though enjoying the warmth of the sun, the young ones raced each other up the hill and back down again, their white tails erect and with the excitement of joy. C.S. Lewis wrote in his wonderful autobiography, Surprised by Joy, that joy is the serious business of heaven. And standing on the porch at that moment, feeling the end of winter and the life-bursting spring ahead, I too felt surprised by joy. For a podcast of this and previous notes, and to learn why currants were banned for 100 years, go to currants.com. That's currants with an A. I'm Greg Quinn, wishing you all the joy of spring.
I'm Mike Bennett, and you're listening to America Weekend.